Peace family, it's your brother Marc Lamont Hill coming in with a breaking news report. Diddy, Sean Diddy Combs, aka Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Brother Love, has been indicted. He has been arrested in New York City just a few moments ago. And it is a huge, though not entirely uh, surprising story. Now, there are a lot of people out there who are giving updates and information, but they are just guessing. They don't have inside tips. They don't have inside connections. They are not speaking to the lawyers. They're not speaking to the journalists on the ground. So please do not believe all of the information that you are given. Right here on the MLH channel, the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, I can give you all the information that I have. I won't tell you anything that I don't know for sure, and I won't leave out anything that I do know for sure. So you know what? Let's just get to it. So this evening, Monday, September 16th, Sean Combs was arrested. He was inside of a Manhattan hotel, and he wasn't surprised by the news. We'll get to that in a moment. But the arrest happened after he was indicted by a grand jury. Now, officially, I'm going to say that again, officially, the indictment is sealed. That means that the charges have not been announced. We don't know technically, officially, what Diddy is being charged for. But there are two reasons why I am able to tell you what Diddy is being charged with. The first thing, of course, is the circumstantial evidence. There is a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence that allows us to understand what happened. In particular, he was arrested in New York. According to his legal team, he voluntarily relocated to New York in anticipation of the charges. This is where he got arrested, represents the Southern District of the federal court system on the East Coast in New York. What does that mean? It means that this is not a state investigation. Diddy did not fly or relocate from Miami or LA to New York for a state crime. It is a federal crime based on the jurisdiction, based on the grand jury indictment, but also, because I'm not just doing circumstantial evidence here, I spoke to people on the ground. And when I say on the ground, I mean people directly involved in Diddy's legal situation and people directly involved in the investigation. And this is, in fact, a federal indictment. This is a federal investigation. These are federal charges that Diddy is faced with. Knowing that he had federal charges is why Diddy relocated to New York in the last couple of weeks. Now, some of you have already seen the signs of it. For the last week, you've seen Diddy pop up in random parts of New York. He was in Washington Square Park. He was a few days ago. He was in Harlem this weekend. He's been all over New York, and Diddy's gone out of his way to not be hyper visible, which for him is a difference, right? I mean, Diddy ran the city. He was all over. He was on all the videos. He was on all the covers. He was in all the TV shows. He was at all the parties. He was at all the celebrations, all the festivals, all the holidays. And now suddenly you don't see Diddy anywhere at all. That is not a coincidence. He was trying to stay out of the way, particularly after getting such incredibly bad press. So seeing him pop up in the last few days, again, was not a coincidence. He understood that he was going in for federal charges. He understood that his days of freedom were relatively limited, potentially. And we'll get to that in a moment as well, because we don't know if he's going to get bail or not. There's reasons to think he will. There's reasons to think he won't. A lot of it comes down to what the charges are. Now, we've seen Diddy deny the charges already, but of course his team quite savvily didn't tell you what the charges were. Diddy's team issued a statement I am going to read that statement to you. Um, they said Sean Diddy Combs is a music icon, a self-made entrepreneur, a loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the Black community. He is an imperfect person, but he is not a criminal. So they're saying that the charges that he's been accused of um, are false allegations, that he's not a criminal. So what could he possibly be charged with that he would so flatly deny? Well, we've seen the Cassie video. So his team couldn't deny violence. We've seen other allegations of him harming men, women, whoever. So they probably wouldn't so flatly deny violence. Again, they said he's not a perfect man, alluding to the things that we already know about him. And let's be clear, those kinds of charges of violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, these are not federal charges. So not only does it not fit his profile, it doesn't fit the scope or the type of charges that he's facing. Again, he's facing a federal indictment. He was not indicted for domestic violence. He was not indicted for smacking a bodyguard or more likely smacking an artist. He ain't smacking Gene Deal, I suspect. This is something different. So you automatically know when someone is charged with federal stuff and they're denying these particular things in this way that it's something big. I thought that, or I assumed, I guessed that it would be something related to something RICO-ish, the RICO statute, and that it was something based on what I heard months ago to do with sex trafficking. This also would be consistent with Homeland Security and all these other people raiding his homes in Miami and LA. Well, I reached out to some people who reached out to some people. And the second people, the ones who were reached out to, were lawyers for Diddy. They were lawyers for Sean Combs. So I didn't speak directly to Sean Combs' lawyer, but I spoke to someone who spoke to Sean Combs' lawyer. And according to them, I was correct in my analysis. I was correct in my assertion. I was correct in my guess that Diddy is being charged with racketeering and sex trafficking. Now, you got to understand, racketeering and sex trafficking sound like awful charges because they are. But they also can sound different depending on the context. They can mean different things depending on the context. So in the case of Diddy, according again to some of the allegations, Diddy's been accused of taking underage girls across state lines. It doesn't mean that he's necessarily human trafficking in the sense of like taking underage girls and like selling them into like the sex trade or sex slavery or anything like that. He could just be, and I don't mean just to mitigate or to minimize what he's doing. I'm just saying it could be different. When I say just, I mean he could satisfy the minimal standards of sex trafficking legally, potentially by taking underage people, maybe boys or girls. What I've heard, girls, but who knows until we read the indictment. Underage girls across state lines. The moment they go across state lines, it's a federal violation, and something that could otherwise be a state crime immediately can become a federal crime simply by taking them across state lines. The racketeering part, a lot of times when people think about racketeering or RICO, they think about the mafia and the RICO statutes in particular, and that's not the only racketeering, but the RICO statutes in particular were created to address organized crime, right? The RICO was to make sure that little people didn't bear the brunt of the crime or the criminal weight. When you had these big kingpins, you could kind of roll up and do other things, right? But the racketeering part could easily be satisfied simply if he's using his company or his business or some kind of infrastructure to secure the sex trafficking stuff. So they go hand in hand. most likely. Again, we'll see the details of the indictment tomorrow. Um, but and since we started this live, Damian Williams, who's the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which again I told you, federal, said we expect to move to unseal the indictment in the morning, and we'll have more to say at that time. Which means that what I told you, that it was federal, that it was the Southern District of New York, and that it's sealed, all true. Puff was staying at the Park Hyatt, New York, on 57th Street in New York, in case y'all care. Homeland Security came in, grabbed him without incident. He'll be held overnight. He'll get arraigned tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll figure out what's next. But this is big. This is big, y'all. And here's the interesting thing. There's a couple of interesting things here. Well, before I get more into the interesting stuff, let's talk for a moment about what's next. He's going to ask for bail. Will he get bail? That's a good question. There's an argument that he should. And, as a general rule, particularly me as an abolitionist, I don't think that bail should be used in the way that it often is, especially against Black people, especially against poor people, especially against the vulnerable in this country. You shouldn't get a gajillion-dollar bail just because just because you can. Bail shouldn't be a punishment. It shouldn't be. We have to. I mean, I actually don't even support cash bail as a system. But all that said, Diddy should get bail as long as there's a reasonable expectation that he will return to court. His team is going to argue he's an established figure. He's too famous to hide. He's never had a criminal conviction, and you can't hold him accountable for whatever happened 20 years ago if he was found not guilty, right? In terms of the shooting in the club, when him and Shine had separate lawyers. So against the backdrop of all of that, there's no reason to think that this upstanding businessman who's never been found guilty of a crime, you can't hold him accountable for all that civil stuff. You can't hold him accountable for all the innuendos and rumors. You can't hold him accountable for what happens on social media, YouTube channels. There's a really good argument that Diddy, from his team, which his team will make, that there's no reason not to give him bail. And then there's the argument that when the feds jumped in Miami and California, that he was about to get on a plane and go away. Now, he could have been just going on vacation. Could have not been violating the law. But a prosecutor may say he was about to skip town. He was headed to a country that doesn't have extradition. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm saying that's what they could argue. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's what they could argue. They could look at other people, other celebrities who have the time, money, and resources to do that. Now, what you do is you say, okay, we'll surrender your passport. We take Diddy's passport. This will force him to come back to court, and then he won't be able to leave. That's what they did with R. Kelly. That's what they did with others. This could happen. That's what you hope happens if you're Diddy. Now, the state, rather not the state, the U.S. government may not even fight for bail or fight bail, right? They may let him have it, assuming, and just take his passport. But either way, this is going to be a major window into how aggressive the federal government's going to be. It's going to be a major window into how strong these charges are. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Diddy. Going to be interesting to see what happens with Diddy. I see some questions popping up. We will. I'm trying to see these questions. Apparently, people are asking questions. I'll take a couple before we go. understand. Someone said, is it not just like TMZ News that this happened, which isn't serious? I mean, it is a problem, but not a solid issue. I'm not sure if someone is suggesting that what Diddy's charged with isn't solid. Well, first, oh, I see. Covering this Diddy stuff is just reactionary, is it not? No, I don't think so. This is a serious issue. This is a major issue. It speaks to one. It's an incredible story to cover and follow as we talk about violence and sex trafficking and all these things. I mean, depending on what the charges are, I mean, this is someone who could potentially be a predator and a menace in our society, in our community. These aren't light charges. These aren't small charges. These are decades of allegations and charges. I don't know what the solution is, but it's tough to say that this isn't a major issue. And I think the idea that this is major, the idea that this isn't major says a lot about our society and about rape culture. Thomas Jones said tearing a black man down, one in matriarchs. I don't think this is tearing a black man down. I don't think this has anything to do with him being a black man. I mean, I'm not saying that what I mean by that is, to be clear, I don't think that there's anything inherently violent or hypersexual or criminal or predatory about black men. This is about one black man, or one man who happens to be black. I'm not using Diddy's blackness in any way to assess or reflect who he is. He's a black man, to be sure. But that ain't got nothing to do with the choices he's made, allegedly, or with the response that he's made. Now, it may shape what type of time he gets, what type of charges he gets, or how the criminal legal system treats him. Yeah, no doubt about that. This is a racist, anti-black system. But that does not mean that he's not guilty of doing some kind of harm. We'll find out. I guess we'll just find out. Someone said, and this is the last thing I'll cover before I move on to the last thing. Somebody said, where did I see it? It's gone now, but I guess here it is. Nice timing to get people's minds off the election. I don't know if it'd be me or the story, but for me, we just did an hour and 10 minutes on the election, 5 minutes before we started this story. But I think there's room in our collective minds to focus on the election, to focus on what's happening around the world, to focus what's happening in our own lives, and to cover this story. Black people, American people, pop culture fans, political fans, we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. So I'm not worried about that. I hear people saying flight risk could be not. Who's to say? I think the most fascinating thing, and this is the last thing I'll say before we go, about this whole story is how likely preventable it was. Diddy was not on anybody's radar. From all accounts that I've heard, Diddy was not on anybody's radar. No feds were on his tail. Shit, he was getting invited to the White House and being a surrogate for presidential campaigns just a year ago. I mean, literally 12 months ago, Diddy was on top of the world. He just got the keys to New York. So clearly feds weren't looking at him. You don't give him the keys to New York if the feds are looking at him in New York. But then those Cassie charges came. The Cassie civil suit came, and instead of just settling, Diddy pushed back. That might be arrogance. Or it might be like, look, I'm calling you bluff. Or it might have been financial prudence. Like, I'm not spending this much money. It's not worth it. Might be ideological difference. It could be lots of reasons. I don't want to guess what's in Diddy's head. What I will say is, I suspect if he could do it again, he would settle with her behind the scenes with no cameras. Because if he had settled with her, not 24 hours later when he settled, not 48 hours later, right? Not after she released that document that set the world on fire. You talk about ether being a napalm bomb. She dropped that. And then people came out the woodwork. The media came out. Other alleged victims came out. Other stories came out. Former bodyguards came out. Everybody said what they needed to say or what they wanted to say. And since then, it's been 12 months of nonstop chatter. And some of that chatter got to the feds. Some of that evidence got to the law. And now suddenly it's not just a question of civil suits, it's a question of criminal suits. And this has taken things to another level. And that is why I think Diddy is in a lot of the mess that he's in. That's not to say that this wouldn't have caught up to him at some point if he's guilty, or even if he's innocent. It's not to say that people wouldn't have made the allegations eventually, but it seems to be an avalanche that occurs after the Cassie suit goes public, which again was entirely preventable. Now, the other challenge Diddy's going to have is the crisis of public trust. You know, there are people who said, "Oh, he's lying. Oh, Cassie was just along for the ride. Oh, there's all this bad stuff. Oh, blah 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 blah." Then the Cassie video came out where he was seen on video. Again, a person he thought he bought off, something he thought was gone, suddenly it popped out, and now he had lied about Cassie, and now he was forced to reckon with that lie. So when Diddy comes out and says, "I'm being framed, I'm being lied, I'll be exempted of all charges, I'll be exonerated, blah, 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 blah," and then he gets caught doing the very thing he said was a lie, and then he has to eat humble pie and come out and say, "I fucked up, y'all," as he did on Instagram at that time, that makes the public say, look, you're only going to admit you did it when you're caught. So when they say, look, he hasn't done anything criminal, he's not a criminal, it's hard to believe it for a lot of people because he's already been caught in like a serious, like super lie. So now it's gonna be hard for Diddy to find a jury, and he deserves a fair trial. It's gonna be hard for Diddy to find a jury that'll give him a fair trial. It's gonna be hard to find people who look at the evidence objectively. It's gonna be hard to find people who don't want to throw him into a cage, not just for whatever he's charged with now, but for all the other stuff that the internet's been circulating. And sadly, because there's been so much homophobia in a lot of the Diddy discourse, there are gonna be a lot of people who are going to punish him for what they see as his own personal sexual choices. So all of it is going to be messy. All of it warrants unpacking. And as I said to the brother in the chat just a moment ago, this is a rich and important story because it speaks to bigger issues in our society around violence, around sexuality, around misogyny, around patriarchy, around corporate culture, around celebrity culture, or around social media, around the law. And we got to cover all of it. We're going to do that right here on the Marc Lamont Hill official channel. So anyway, that's it for right now, but keep watching. We'll be following the story, I promise you, very, very closely. So keep watching as we talk about Diddy's arrest, Diddy's indictment, and Diddy's ongoing legal troubles, which seem to be not going to end anytime soon. Anyway, y'all, thank you for watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the join button and become a monthly member of the channel so you get information like this and stories like this all the time. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Peace.